Hello and welcome back. This is ProTailDev back with another remaster video for Corrupting Spring. So let's get straight into this. What we're working on today is we're going to be looking at the rig for the flower monster that we created, our giant flower. We'll also be looking at adding materials, so colours to our specific monsters. So very straightforward, rigs and material. Let's get straight into it. Okay, so what we're going to start off with is we've got our flower, our giant flower, which we've already created and modelled, and we're ready now to put the rig in. So the rig is specifically an armature, which is a little bit different than Maya, but very relatively the same. You basically create a armature that is like a joint, or it should I say a bone, which will go up gradually all the way to the top. And then split off, and then when you skin it, you add the skin weights to it. It will basically control the individual, essentially the skin, which is the model's faces. So here I am just adding in all the bones, specific things that are going to control each section. I try and keep them relatively the same, so I've got the squares already set up for how big I want them, and then I'm just holding control and stuff to make sure that they're specifically the same. And then trying to get a bit of a good angle, focusing on a specific point where I kind of want to extend them off. So this is where they're going to start splitting into specific places, specific areas for each petal specifically for our big flower at the top. This is really where we want to do this so that we can have it fold in and move on its own, as opposed to it just being all moving together. I don't go into handles, IK handles or anything like that. I don't want to make this too complicated. I want to try and, but if I wanted to make it so that it would happen much more automatically and they'd move in together and there's a limitation to how far they can move, then I'd use that, but I don't really want to do that because I don't want to get too into it. So this is what I'm doing. I'm adding these bones into specific petals. It's a total of 3 of them from the basic part that's connected to the center. And I'm just looking at a top-down view of it, just so it's easier for me to, see it. And then I'm trying to get them roughly the same. I make some adjustments later to the size, just to make sure that they're not too out of the way. But you've got to get them as close as you can to our model segment. So I try and keep them as close inside of the model as possible. This is why I made the petals so thick, is so that I can have the bones inside. That makes skin weights, when you do it automatically to generate it, it makes it a lot better and more accurate. If it's kind of outside, then sometimes you'll get a lot of it overlapping other parts that you don't want of the model. So that's what I'm doing here. Then when it's done and I've got a basic rig, and then highlight it and then highlight the model, and then automatically generate a skin. So once that's done, I want to try and test it out. I want to try and move certain things, and so that's what I'm doing. I'm rotating. As you can see, it does rotate. It moves the model while moving the rig, which is what I want. And I have a quick look at it, kind of what it looks like, and it's exactly what I want. Then I move into petals, which is the very top of the flower, to see if I can specifically bend each one. And as you can see, I can. So that works out pretty well. I then make sure that I can bend it and twist it, and before I move on, I quickly check the skins to make sure they're correct. So I click on each bone for the rig, just to see which part is skinned correctly, and looking at how strong the actual effect is of each individual area. I don't want it to be too strong, so I look on each and every single bone to make sure it's correct, and highlighting roughly the same parts, make sure it doesn't, if the skinning isn't correct, you could get a lot of stretching, places that pull where they shouldn't, and so that's what I'm doing here, is just making sure that it's all correct. So after quite a lot of checking, I find that there's nothing really wrong with the skin. It was relatively simple, and then I move on to materials. So in Unity, I'll actually change the materials and create my custom materials myself. The reason why I do this is so that each face has a specific material associated with it. So when I go into Unity later, I can just add a material to a specific part and it will update the rest of the flower. And this way, it's much easier for me later. Otherwise, it'll just be one material. So associating specific faces with a material is much easier later on for me to customize the overall design. So as you can see, what I'm doing here is creating new materials. The base is brown, and then I'm going to have like a green, a dark and light green going all the way up. And then the top is going to be pink-ish with different colours. It's going to look quite nice. So I basically choose about 3 faces up and all the way around the flower all the way to the top to keep the colour going. So here you are, just skipping ahead a little bit to what its colour. And then again, when I take it into Unity later, I'll probably mess around with the colours a lot more. I might even have different colours and different flowers depending on the difficulty, or maybe even what size they are, what the functionality they have. But there you go. So this is what the stem looks like, and I think it looks good. It's a good like parallel. It looks a little bit different rather than just having it straight green. And again, make the top a little bit of a colour because it is a flower at the end of the day. And so I kind of add a little bit of variation to the top, so it starts off with a little bit of green spikes all the way around, and then the petals themselves will change. So I think I go with like a darker pink for the base petals, and then I get lighter as I go to the center, I think. Or it might be the very tips of the top flower, the top petals, the very tip. I think I'm much lighter pink. I think it stands out a little more. So here I am just playing around with the colour and making sure that the materials are correct, and it makes it look a lot better later. So there you go, I've got a design going for the flower. This is really going to stand out, I think, in the game and make it look quite nice. Again, this is all going to be moving, which I'll be focusing on that in the next video, animation for this guy in Unity. So here I am adding this lighter pink and going with these edges as a separate material. Once obviously I've created the material and associated them with the face, I can always change the material later. I try and get it roughly similar in Unity as these colours, specifically because this is kind of what I was going for. However, I can always change it. That's the luxury of it, is I can just change it whenever I like and really play around with it. So the very center is going to be red because there's going to be a red light in the center. I'm not sure if I'll change that because I'm a bit worried about having lights everywhere. I'm a bit worried about the frame rate, but I noticed an issue here where I want to try and make sure that there's 4 vertices for each face, and here they've got triangles. I don't like working with triangles. Depending on who you ask, some people like working with triangles. I don't. I think it deforms wrong and it causes issues later on. I prefer having a 4 vertices face as opposed to a triangle. So that's what I go with here. I add a bunch more edge loops or lines so that I can play around with the smoothness of the center and make it more spherical and more of a hole into the very center, and then I make it red. So it's going to be, I think, darker red and then lighter red at the middle, and there you go. And then the light is basically going to be in the center there, probably more of a spotlight, and so I can have it more in darker levels, have it shine in specific places. I think it would be really interesting. I noticed a few other issues where certain faces are overlapping. This is partly just because they're one face is higher than the other when it shouldn't be when it's underneath, and so what I do is I just fix them with some smoothing tools with the sculpting and personal adjustments, which is what I'm doing here to make it seem a little bit more thicker at the petals. So minor adjustments that I made of that, and we move on to our other model. And I don't plan on doing any kind of rigging for this character, for this enemy. I just want the hoops to spin and shoot from where the circles are. And so what I'm doing here is make sure the circles are the same colour at the back, the circles at the front are going to be a different colour, and the rings are going to be a different colour to the main enemy. I didn't really know what kind of colours I wanted. I wanted it to kind of stand out but also not blend in with the background, but then I don't want it to be too flashy and too distracting. So eventually I went off with just a basic changing colours, because I can always change it in Unity. So that's it. It's a bit of a shorter video, but hopefully next time what we'll be working on is animation. We'll be making those hoops spin on that enemy, and we're going back to our giant plant monster, and we'll be adding some animation to that as well, specifically when it spawns, and maybe some idle movement. Okay, I'll do it. This is ProTail Dev, and we'll see you in the next video.